The next segment of our show features the illustrious cellist Robert Cohen, and I wanted to give you a little introduction about his performance and recording career. His debut recording was made at age 19 of the Elgar Cello Concerto with the London Philharmonic Orchestra, which went silver. He has since recorded and performed other concertos under many renowned conductors, including Claudio Abbado, Antal Dorati, Kurt Mazur, Riccardo Muti, Roger Norrington, and Simon Rattle. In the U.S., he premiered Sally Beamish's Cello Concerto No. 2 with the Minnesota Symphony Orchestra, and he also premiered it with the Halle Orchestra and the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra in the UK. He was the cellist of the Fine Arts Quartet here in the U.S. from 2011 to 2018, and his many other chamber music performances are too numerous to list, but have included collaborations with Sir Yehudi Menuhin, Menahem Pressler, Kavakis, Zimmerman, and the Amadeus String Quartet, with whom he recorded Schubert's Cello Quintet on Deutsche Grammophon label. Cellists like myself will be interested in his online cello clinic, celloclinic.com, as well as his Cohen Pod Talks on iTunes. He now teaches at the Royal Academy in London, where last year he was named William Pleath Professor of Cello in recognition of his career in teaching. I spoke to him in England via Zoom this week about his fantastic recording of the Bach Cello Suites. Okay, we're talking to Robert Cohen here on WKCR FM New York. Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So happy to have you on the Bach Festival this year. And every time I host a show, I always feature your recording, which I found very serendipitously on my first trip to England. I was in a music shop and I saw your CD and I hadn't heard of you yet. And I bought it, and what a great purchase. I love these recordings, and every time I play them, people call in and say, "Oh, who was that?" Playing the Bach Suites, and they want to know how to buy it here and in the U.S. And it's just such a great recording.
Thank you.
That this music has just been so great for so many years, and I'm just wondering why you think that is, and how they're important to you personally.
Well, yes, I think they're so personal. I feel that somehow they're like poetry in a way. I feel that, you've got this single cello voice, which, like people are often saying how the cello is like the human voice. And I feel that my kind of idea is that they are like a choir, actually. I think almost like when I'm playing the music, that I'm playing the music for a choir, all the different voices. But because it's poetry, it's as though so many things are suggested but not needed to be said. So there's a kind of incredible purity in the music, and I feel an enormous emotional quality to them. And when so many people have used Bach to be calm, to heal themselves even. I mean, and also it gets chosen, doesn't it? I've been asked to play it at all sorts of events, from celebrations to funerals to, because somehow it's so touching, his music in general. But of course, the cello suites have always been a part of my life. And since I was a child, I think probably I heard the Pablo Casals recordings when I was sort of 5 or 6. And then I was taught Bach Cello Suites by my great teacher, William Pleath. And he had such an extraordinary approach to it. And because there's such enormous discipline in his music. He, of course, was the greatest architect of music. And I always feel that the strength in the architecture gives us this enormous freedom in the music, freedom to kind of interpret it the way we want, but also freedom, emotional freedom. And I think the combination of this purity and emotional freedom is so moving for the listener. And I always feel that, playing it and having this kind of poetry and this feeling of intimacy with the sound, intimacy with the audience when I perform it, I find it very touching. And I think it's kind of timeless music. You know, you were saying, like, why 300 years later, why is it so relevant now? I think it's timeless. I mean, you know, Louise, sometimes when I'm playing certain movements, like as an encore after playing concerto in a concert, people will come backstage and say, "What's this new music you played? You know, has it just been written?" And I think it is. It's absolutely timeless, and it feels like it could have been written yesterday, and yet it's kind of basis for everything we do. It's the inspiration for so many composers, the inspiration to us. And I think throughout my life, it's been kind of, like we say, the backbone. But I mean, that sounds a bit kind of rigid, doesn't it, really? And somehow it's much more than that.
No, it sounds fortifying.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for Pablo Casals, which is the first recording, one of the first I heard as well, Bach became sort of a voice of courage because he finished his recordings in London right before he went into exile in Prague, and then basically didn't play much in public for 11 years until Alexander Schneider flew over from the US to study Bach with him and to try to cajole him into playing again. And the first performances he came back for were Bach, actually.
Yeah.
So
I think there's so spiritual music, isn't it, as well? There's this feeling that, you know, we really connect with something when we play it, but also when we listen to it. And also it's, again, this kind of incredible structure that the musicians, of course, have to understand really well. But that structure is, in a way, like jazz, isn't it? You know, there's this kind of improvisatory quality to the Bach Cello Suites. And you get that because it's so powerful and so strong. In fact, I've even played it with a wonderful jazz saxophonist in Finland called Jukka Perkko. And I was playing the cello suites and he was improvising around me. And it was absolutely fabulous experience. But it just, you know, I can listen to the cello Bach suites. I don't know how you feel, but I can listen to it played on anything. I mean, I've heard wonderful performances on the violin, on the trumpet, I hear all sorts of performances of the cello suite, and for me, it's just fantastic freedom, and I love all of those things. And I think it's also, you know, my feeling about playing the cello suites is that perhaps, you know, each suite is set in a different key, and that key fundamentally sets a tone, sets an emotional palette, a character, really. You feel that, you know, the G major first suite, the one with the prelude that's so incredibly famous, that's kind of calm and beautiful and open. And then we move to the next suite in D minor, which has this sort of very tragic and beautiful personal feeling. And the C major is then kind of powerful and opening. And so each suite has its basic character. But then, because Bach is also the greatest master of modulation, moving from one key to the next, all the time sliding and switching and surprising us with different key changes. And each key, to me, represents another character, another sensation, another emotion. And so it's never-ending kind of stimulation of switches and moves, which take us like really through the poetry of the music. And I think and then the breathing, which I think is something also really unbelievable in Bach, because, you know, we're playing almost continuously, unlike in any other music we play from beginning to end, and yet the music breathes so beautifully between phrases. It's naturally stretching and pulling. And I think all of these very human elements, for me, make, you know, this is why I love Bach so much, because it is so human. It connects so beautifully with me, and I feel that when I'm playing it also to my audience in that way.
Yes, and yeah, that comes clearly through in your recording. You're just to go back a little bit, you mentioned studying with William Pleath, and wondering if if he affected your approach to playing the Bach suites, or if there are other things that affected you, like the early music movement or other
Well,
teachers in your life.
yeah, that's really it. William Pleath was an enormous influence on me early on, and it remains in my heart and in my mind actually even now. And he was very, very involved in the beginning of this kind of Baroque movement, introducing the Baroque cello even to his son Anthony Pleath, who was very, very instrumental in bringing this Baroque music scene to the world. And William Pleath was even playing the Baroque cello to me. But I think the influence he had on me was to explain that one has to be so clear with everything you do, but in that clarity in how you play. Because, we also know that the Bach Cello Suites are technically amazingly demanding. I mean, how he thought of producing such demands from the cello 300 years ago is extraordinary. But they are very demanding because in a way you have to play technically perfectly to play them well. And at the same time, you have not to be restricted by that kind of concentration on that perfection, but to understand the beauty in that perfection. And I think he taught me so many things, including in Bach, which was the fact that it's never the same twice. You never have to play the music the same way twice. And actually, going back to the idea of the recordings, I think I struggled a lot when I made the recording, because the moment I finished it, I wanted to do it again, to do it differently. And I think I would do it differently every single day of my life, more than in any other music that I play. And I think all musicians find that there is no one way. And that means that your imagination is constantly challenged for what you can do with this music. I mean, the space within it to think of new ideas, to express it differently, to turn a phrase one way or another way or another way or another way is really incredible. I mean, and that is why you can play Bach all day, every day of your life, in any situation, and still love it.
And I guess when you're performing them, you have the chance of the repeats to put some kind of difference in it. Do you try to do that when you're performing them?
Well, of course, apart from the prelude, which is a kind of, one from beginning to end you play it, but all the other movements are in two halves, and we repeat each half. But my approach to that is not to think of it as one half repeated and then the second half repeated, but really to think of it as 4 sections and just a journey through the 4 sections, because, yes.
Okay, we're back. I am in New York, and Robert Cohen is in the countryside in England right now, so we lost our connection, but we're back. And you were just talking about the repeats being an opportunity to go from beginning to end as sort of a journey through 4 sections, since the first and the second half of the repeat movements are both repeated twice. And then I lost you, so I'm sorry.
I think our signal's having to go through the countryside trees and the long grass and everything to get to you. Sorry about that.
Oh, no. Sounds lovely, actually.
So, in that way, that all the movements which have in 2 halves with a repeat, I feel, that when you're playing music once, you play the first part, and then you come to so-called repeat it again. I think already having had the experience of playing the music once, you're more enlightened, you have a sense that you are on a journey already, so that when you come to repeat it, for me, it's not like a repetition, it's like another chance to see the music in a different way and to express it in a new way and to see it differently. And then that takes you to the beginning of the third part, which is our so-called development, and the same thing happens again. So it ends up being a journey of 4 parts, for all of the dance movements in all their ways, and that I feel that, for instance, when students play to me a Bach suite, I always want to hear the repeats, because I feel somehow really at a loss without that kind of continual development of the music. And it takes me deeper into the music rather than just a repetition. I'm not fond of repetition in general. I like adventure.
So when you were making this recording at Snape Maltings in 1990, were you finding the experience of recording there different from when you performed the suites? And can you tell us anything else about recording in such a historical hall?
Yes, well, I think I always find it really hard to play music without an audience, as though I'm performing it. You know, you're sitting on the platform in front of an empty hall with microphones around you, with this kind of sense that every note you play will be set in stone for forever and ever. And that's quite terrifying, especially when it's the kind of music which you love to play differently every single time. So kind of, you have to just do it once and that will be that. But playing it in such a beautiful place with a great history is enormously helpful. And actually it's a history for me as well, because when I first started playing the cello at age 5, one of the first things I did was to go on a music course, which was at Snape Maltings in Suffolk, in Aldborough.
The Britton Peers.
Britton Peers were long before, Benjamin Britten, the composer, and Peter Pears, the singer, and the Aldborough Festival. So I sort of grew up actually going to music festivals and to master classes that William Pleath took at the Snape Maltings, and giving concerts there. And so kind of throughout my life, I've been quite closely connected to it. So it felt very nice to be on that platform recording, this icon of all cello music. And so although it was scary, and although I'd love to go back and do it again 100 times, it was a beautiful experience to play in that acoustic with such music. But actually we had some quite funny experiences, because, when you're playing Bach, you're the only instrument, and any noise that comes from the outside can be quite disturbing for the recordings. And Snape Maltings is a beautiful, fabulous place, but it's not soundproofed. And when the weather gets really stormy on the coast there, which we had, then the roof starts clicking and making noises, and the wind starts blowing. And here I am trying to play a beautiful, quiet saraband, and there's all this noise going around, and the producer's coming in saying, "I'm sorry, Robert, we have to stop and you have to play it again." And all sorts of funny things happen. Some elderly lady stopped in her car, which was parked about 100 yards away, and her chauffeur got out the car, went to go in to buy some sweets for her, and this car was rumbling away outside, and the producers came in again and said, "I'm sorry, we've got all this rumbling noise, we don't know what it is." And it was finally traced to this car parked 100 yards away. So it wasn't quite as simple as just playing it through. We did have quite a few interruptions. And it's silly things like that you also remember all these years later.
Wow. Oh my gosh, yeah. But it's I had the privilege of going to the Britton Peers School once, a very long time ago, and it was amazing. I got to meet Hugh McGuire and William Pleath and some great musicians, and have Guinness for the first time in my life, as it's meant to be. So it was incredible. But anyway, so I know a little bit about that venue. And one last question, if I may. Do you feel that over the years, I know you're saying, of course you want to play it differently every time, but do you feel maybe since you've made this recording that your interpretations have changed?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because I think that my interpretations have changed even from day to day. But if I dare listen to the recording, which It's not my favorite thing to do. I don't like to listen to my own recordings, partly because it kind of takes me back immediately to the sessions which I was actually recording them in, and that never being quite as happy an experience as playing to a public. So I tend to rather avoid listening to them. But of course, I do hear them every now and again. And I suppose it's still my emotional landscape that is the way I see music, the way I feel about music. So even though I change details, I might change tempi, I might play at different speed, I might see different things within the music, I might focus in on certain ideas, I might create a slightly different sense of the dance, the drama, the tension, all the different elements, the colors. I have to say that probably it's still not a million miles away from what it was then. Yeah. Because I am still the same person and I still love the music just as much. And I think those are major factors in one's approach. I don't think it'll ever change so dramatically. And that's because I think I allow myself to feel genuinely about the music. I'm not trying to do something different. I just happen to see something different in it as I get older, I suppose, as I have more experience playing. But they are all genuine, natural instincts and reactions to the music. And because it's still me, I guess it's not going to be so different.
Well, the love is coming through very clearly on this recording, and that's why.
Oh, thank you.
I play it. I listen to it often. I think it's fantastic. So.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for joining us here. We're listening to WKCR FM New York, and we're now going to hear Robert Cohen's recording of the E-flat Suite Number 4. Thank you so much for joining us, Robert.
Thank you very much.